Hi, I'm author Lynn Lustig, and I want art in my books, so I'm drawing it. Come see. Hey friends, welcome and welcome back. I'm so excited about today's Chibi because this was one of the most epic commissions I have done yet. And by epic, I mean it's still just a couple of chibis, but I went so overboard with it, you have no idea. But you will soon. So this is actually going to be a chibi throuple, which is a 3-person couple, for my author friend Calista Jayne. Calista Jayne writes erotica. She's primarily found on Ream and on Radish, and her stuff is fun, guys. Like, I read one of her stories and was like, this has awakened things. I probably should think about that later on therapy day. And so she requested to have these 3 main characters done together as a perk to give out with some of her Ream subscriptions, and I was very excited to jump on the case. So here's a brief background of what's happening with these characters. So her book description is 2 dominant bodyguards, 1 desperate princess, and a dash of daddy issues. It's the perfect recipe for a royally effed up romance. I've spent my entire life imprisoned by my father's rules. What to wear, what to eat, where to go, who to talk to. No decision is mine to make. Worse, he's decided I'm to marry a man of his choosing. Is it any surprise that I act out? He's assigned 2 guards to keep me complacent. I have no choice but to rebel. My father thinks they'll stop me from escaping, but I have another, more twisted plan in mind. I'll dazzle them, seduce them, manipulate them into helping me break the rules. Both guards are stern, sexy, and dominant. Both of them refuse to touch me. Can they make me behave? I bet my crown they can't. So there's your brief introduction. Fair warning, I'm actually going to read a sample that she gave me. There's nothing too spicy that happens in this particular part, but just wanted to let you know, like, that's generally the vibe of the story, so just keep that generally in mind. Book 1, The Rebellious Princess, Chapter 3. Normally at this hour before supper, I'd be working on plans for the Education and Animal Rescue Center that has been my passion project for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, the last time I tried to get this project off the ground, my contractor flaked out and it set me back quite a bit. This afternoon finds me pacing from my personal sitting room back to my bedroom and then to my sitting room again. My father has a new security team coming today. My brothers never had this much supervision. Heck, they would routinely escape the guards and go off to whatever adventure they wanted. And our father never did anything about it. It was Nate who told me about the trellis and how easy it is to sneak past the guards on that side of the palace. But heaven forbid a girl sneaks out. I'm pretty sure Mr. Blackwood set this whole thing in motion. I want to kick him. There's a knock at my door, and I pause in my pacing. Yes, Your Highness, your father would like to see you in the first floor drawing room. Thank you, Scranton, I say, opening the door and stepping out. He eyes me up and down, displeasure on his features. Even his well-trimmed mustache seems to judge me. Scranton and I have never been each other's favorite. He would never show it outwardly, of course. He's too professional for that. But I've seen the way he looks at and interacts with my brothers and father, and the way he looks at and interacts with me. I'm not sure if he dislikes all women or only me. I follow him down the hall and 2 sets of stairs to the drawing room on the first floor. He steps aside at the entry and says, Her Royal Highness, Princess Ruby. I'm glad he didn't announce me by my full name and title because that's a mouthful and a pain in the butt, and honestly, nobody cares. As I step into the room, I see my father, Mr. Blackwood, and 3 men I don't know. But one of those men looks familiar. Sandy blonde hair, bright blue eyes. Where do I know him from? Introductions are made, the men shake my hand, and I'm invited to sit. My attention keeps returning to the familiar man. He's wearing a nice suit, probably because he's meeting my father. What if he was wearing all black like Mr. Blackwood? That's where I know you from, I blurt. Margaret. What? He looks puzzled. Maybe I'm wrong. The musical? Marguerite? You were the security guard. I trail off, now uncertain. I was there, Your Royal Highness, yes. I was there, Your Royal Highness, yes. I want to flip him off again. I'd met another guy at the musical, and he wanted to buy me a drink at an intermission, but I knew my guards had been instructed not to let me interact with men. Something about preserving my image of chaste propriety or some such nonsense like that. But before I could even talk to the guy, I'd run into this hulking block of stone and he'd alerted my guards, and my entire forbidden love affair was over before it could begin. Asshole. What are you doing here? I demand. It's because Mr. Kell noticed the weakness in your security detail that he's here today, Father says. He's going to be working with Blackwood to develop and improve the systems we have in place, and you'll be bringing your own guards with you when you travel. If you are allowed to travel at all. Oh, this again? I can feel my face getting hot with anger at Father's implied reprimand. It's useless to tell him that Marcus and Nathan were off ditching their security details throughout their entire adolescence. He doesn't care and won't ever care because it's different because you're a young woman. I'm a grown-ass adult. Scranton appears just in time to announce supper. Our small party relocates to the dining room where the men talk about security and exchange anecdotes illustrating how very tough they are. The conversation is riddled with humble brags and a bunch of other bullshit. Mr. Kell tries to capture my gaze more than once, but I studiously ignore him except when everybody else's attention is on the view of Safina Bay, and the otters barely visible from where we're sitting. Everyone except Mr. Kell is looking at the otters. He's looking at me. I stick out my tongue and am nearly caught by Mr. Blackwood. Mr. Kell grins. I hate him. Instead of eating, I push my food around my plate. If I come down to the kitchen later, Gloria, my favorite cook, will probably help me put something together. Yes, I'm spoiled. Finally, supper's over. Father instructs Scranton to show Mr. Kell to a room. He also offers to let Mr. Callahan and Mr. Marcel stay over instead of trying to take the late ferry back to San Esteban. But they decline because their wife is waiting at home for them. Sounds as if they share. Interesting. San Esteban is known for its non-traditional relationships. Ever since I was old enough to think about it, I've been curious how something like that would work. Everyone filters out into the corridor, but while the men go one way, I turn the other and return to my rooms. A word, if you will, princess, someone says. I spin around and see Mr. Blackwood standing right in the middle of the corridor. What? I ask. It isn't my place, he says, but your behavior at supper. I snort and turn back around and walk to my rooms. He doesn't get to tell me off. I know my behavior was lacking. I don't need to hear him say it. A warm hand touches my shoulder. The heat travels through my skin and down to my belly and settles between my legs. I stop walking and go completely still. Princess, he says. I close my eyes. Do I hear yearning in his voice? Nope, I'm imagining it. Wishing for it so hard that I hear things that aren't there. Mr. Kell is going to be here for several days, if not several weeks, Mr. Blackwood says. It's best you overcome your dislike of him so we can all get along. He'll be a guest at your father's table along with me. He'll be staying here in the palace also. I picture Mr. Kell in a dim bedroom, the covers thrown back to expose broad shoulders. More heat pools low in my belly. Is that all? I ask. He lets go of my shoulder. Yes, princess. Good night. I try to force out a good night of my own, but the words jam hard in my throat and I flee down the corridor, past portraits of dead relatives staring down at me with mocking smiles on their faces. Gavin. Roman inserts himself seamlessly into our palace operations. The first full day he's here, he merely watches how we do things. I'm impressed that he doesn't immediately begin throwing his weight around, but that doesn't seem to be his style. He's observant and patient. Good qualities. I'm observant too, which means I haven't missed the way the princess looks at him when he isn't looking at her. I've even seen her in her room, watching from the window as Roman and I follow the guards who patrol the grounds. She might look like she detests the guy, but I recognize that flare of interest in her gaze. Your system isn't bad, Roman says, interrupting my thoughts. I quickly turn away from the princess's window and face him. High praise, I say drily. Do you have any technology monitoring the grounds? He asks. The king refuses, I say. He doesn't want cameras on the building. It would help him keep watch where there are no guards. Even with a group as big as yours, they can't be everywhere at once. We know, I say. But the king has get-togethers, and he doesn't want the risk of anything being recorded. Roman's mouth curls. I see. I can see the thought running through his mind, that the king is doing something illicit or taboo at these parties. He wouldn't be entirely wrong. I hesitate to call the parties orgies, because nothing happens out in the open. But there is the expectation of sex in secluded corners, and plenty of it. So, no cameras, Roman continues. What about hiring more guards? The palace barracks are already full, I say, shaking my head. I've broached the idea of building a second barracks, but the king isn't in favor. So the low number of personnel are why the palace hires out when the royals travel, Roman guesses. Yes, we can spare a few, but if the trip is going to span several days, they need to operate in shifts, which means we need more bodies. He nods. And how often do the royals travel? The king, not often at all. He prefers to remain on the island. Both princes are out as much as they're home. Prince Marcus has a penthouse in San Esteban. He stays there frequently, but he prefers anonymity, and keeps only 2 guards with him. Prince Nathan, he's the partier, Roman says. I wouldn't put it like that, I say, trying not to sound indignant, because it's the truth. But he does have a more active social life. And the princess? It's there. A shift in his tone. I can hear it. Her trips off the island are few and far between. He cocks his head to the side, as if wondering whether I'll explain further, but I don't. So this is everyday operations, he says. How do things change when the king is hosting one of his parties, or during other events? I walk him through the basics of how we decide which guards to allot to which quadrants of the property and home. But you'll get to see it soon for yourself, I say. There's a family coming this weekend, the Brandons. The name sounds familiar, he says. Are they royals? Royal adjacent. They're a highly respected family from the island of Rondoro. I pause. And the son is betrothed to our princess. Alright guys, there you have it. That is an excellent chapter by Calista Jayne. I am very excited to keep reading. I, of course, am on her ream because I have to be. The way she writes is just very delicious. And surprisingly fun to read aloud. I don't usually do that much. I hope you enjoyed watching these characters come to life while I was reading them, and I hope that you end up joining me again soon for a little bit more. You're gonna get to see these guys full color. And with that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back soon, you wonderful human. All right, see ya.